I very recently went through an emotional crisis that concerned pretty much every aspect of my life. It started with a comment a colleague made at work, which wasn't even about me. It actually had to do with the long-term future of the company I work for. What happened later was the usual thing for me, which is that I took the comment seriously and started picturing all the negative scenarios that could result from that imaginary future, because that's what my survival instinct often does. Now, I could do some introspection and realize that this was an episode of catastrophism. I could pinpoint the trigger. I could try to understand why it is that I use this mechanism to anticipate the future so often. But I don't want to do that today, because I know that when we go through a crisis or episode like that, it's really hard to understand people who tell you that you're giving too much importance to only a potential, quite unrealistic future. They make it seem as if you're making a tempest in a teapot, as they call it. It's really hard to understand them, because usually when I'm in such a state, I see it the other way around, that other people are not taking something important as seriously as they should. It feels as though I'd been given a special lens or realization or piece of information that others don't have access to. I might even say at times it feels as if I had to warn them about the matter that's worrying me so they too can prepare. Again, not to say that that perspective of mine is reasonable and well-founded, but in the midst of it is really hard to change my mindset, because changing the mindset is a long process. And I've very recently started using a sort of emergency kit that, when I go through a moment like the one I've just described, I usually say it feels like a cold, wet, gray and rundown room. Or not even a room, just the corner of a room with a leaky roof. Everything around me just feels and looks like that. So I use this emergency kit to restore a feeling of safety and, most importantly, of warmth. And it's even allowed me to rekindle the glimmer of hope very quickly. My strategy follows 6 steps, and they go from the most tangible and physical and maybe obvious to changes in perspective that I've accumulated. I have a disclaimer though, which is that I'm not a psychologist or any other kind of mental health care provider, and I'm only speaking from personal experience with the intention to hopefully share a tool or two that others, you, can benefit from. Step 1, escape the gray corner. That description of the gray room without a roof is evidently for me a representation of feeling unprotected and trapped, abandoned. The first step is then to get myself out of it visually and physically. That means I remind myself that I'm not in such a place by adjusting my surroundings. And this is the step that might be a little obvious, and I suppose we sometimes take it unconsciously, but other times I've realized I am so bogged down that it doesn't even cross my mind to carry it out. For me then, at this point, lighting is essential. I usually turn on my bedside lamp or candles. Any source of warm light is great for this because it reminds me of natural sunlight, which is vital. And if I'm not at home, then I try to look for a space with actual sunlight or a room with similar lighting. Probably the best is to seek the sun, but I don't know why when I feel distressed, I just prefer this impression and feeling that I get if I stay indoors, which is that I'm protected from the outside. I also warm up my body if it's a cold day. I've realized I get particularly irritable if I feel any sort of physical discomfort. So I change my clothes when I get home and put on something cozy that doesn't feel restrictive. But if it is hot, then I wear loose clothes with soft fabrics like a fresh dress. In any case, the texture of the clothes should be gentle to my skin. And then to help regulate my temperature, I make some comforting food or drinks, the kinds of food I get myself in fall or winter, or something refreshing and nourishing if it's summer. If possible, I take the time to slow down and enjoy the preparation process by contemplating and fully embodying the movements of my hands and the gentle touch of the clothes I've chosen. I try to breathe slowly, let the oxygen get to all the parts of my body, and then when the meal and drink are ready, I just turn off my thoughts and just enjoy the experience of having that food in my carefully selected clothes and bathing in the warm light. I'd say though that food is something we may want to consider carefully, because if we have a tendency to use it as a coping mechanism, then in that case leave it out of the emergency kit. Company is optional. If I feel like it, I may call a person either while I'm eating the food or later when my body's calmed down a bit. This doesn't mean I want to tell them what I'm going through, and actually I admit I generally prefer to get through it all on my own first, but it is another measure that can make me feel protected and loved. So this whole first step, which revolves around lighting, touch, and taste, is important to me because it's a reminder that I can color my own surroundings and that I have the capacity to remove shades of gray myself. Step 2. Implement a mental intervention. Once I have my nervous system a little under control, I take the time to comfort my mind. I know I'm one of those with obsessive traits and prone to rumination, and that means I have to find a way to turn my brain off. But that's easier said than done, for sure, because the root of the problem is precisely that my mind thinks it's getting me prepared for any future scenario by making me ruminate about hypothetical problems. So I remind myself of the following, which is probably the insight that's had the greatest impact on my mental health in years. It is that I don't have to constantly occupy my brain with the worst possible scenario to prevent it, and that doing so doesn't do anything to prevent the situation by itself. And I like comparing this to earthquakes. In my city, everyone knows how to act when there's an earthquake. We have at least 2 national drills a year, which is how we're reminded of what we have to do if a strong earthquake hits. But that's it. People don't spend every day thinking about what they should do if it starts shaking any given day. People don't stay next to their front doors, just in case there's an earthquake today. People take showers, they cook meals, they go to bed. They lie down on their sofas. They don't have this constant mental noise that they should instead be ready to turn the doorknob anytime, And yet, that doesn't mean we're not ready to act if that event takes place. And I usually tell myself that life is the same. More often than not, the actual solution is making a few decisions, taking a few steps, just sometimes, so that we're protected from the bleakest scenario. For example, and something that has been extremely triggering for many people recently, losing my job to AI might just be, at least for now, taking a course on the weekend for a few months to stay updated. Having a little more financial security might just be saving up a percentage of what I spend on leisure, and that's it. Often with rumination, the rest of the solution is to wait and see what the future brings and adapt as we go. Another key way to put it is that stopping the hamster wheel of obsessive thoughts and rumination doesn't mean I'm not taking action. The ship won't sink if I stop thinking obsessively. It is perfectly fine and wise to take the helm once in a while, to make sure everything's okay, to make sure everything's under control, and then it's also okay to rest. So, I give myself some time to meditate, to do some guided visualization, which is something I love, or just engage in fantasy with books or movies, escapism, which is something I recommend during those moments. Step 3, do not misinterpret the emotion. What happens to me after steps 1 and 2 is that I make a mistake. So by now I feel grounded and my brain's not running in circles anymore, but I still struggle to understand that the heart needs its place and attention too. I make the mistake of thinking that self-regulating means not experiencing an unpleasant emotion, when really it is letting it be. The difference is, after steps 1 and 2, I don't stoke the unpleasant fire with mental noise. I don't make the experience worse by subjecting my body to the physiological reactions that my imagination was producing with all that thinking, because it's been proven that when you examine a scenario, when you play it in your head many times, your body reacts as though you were going through that. So now, after steps 1 and 2, it's just me, and in the background, of course, a disagreeable feeling that may take a while to wear off. But it's a toned down emotion, and that's the key. Even if it doesn't go away, it will go down, and in some cases even go away completely. In the meantime, I can only take care of myself and be patient and understanding. Step 4, do not underestimate exhaustion. You know when kids throw a tantrum, which, by the way, is a phrase I hate because of the connotations it has, but that's another story. But it's 7 p.m. and it's been a long day, and chances are they're tired and can take any more stimuli. I am particularly suspicious if I'm having a pessimistic episode in the evening. I'm not saying it is not legitimate to experience it and that my emotions are less valid then, but I find it useful to remind myself that late in the day, after so much stress, so much exhaustion, noise, traffic, and even hunger and thirst, I'm more prone to distorting reality and narrowing in on one single aspect and losing perspective. I have a saying, by the way, that I've used for years, which is that perspective means contentment. It actually goes, knowledge means perspective and perspective means contentment, but the key word here is perspective. More often than not, we can only process the information that allows us to gain perspective with a fresh brain. Maybe in the morning, when we're not overwhelmed by the heavy weight of a long day. So sometimes I just need some sleep, a shower or a bath. Sometimes what I need actually is clearing out my space so that visually it is not cluttered in my mind, or that it is not cluttered and my mind can rest, I have learned that tidying up makes me feel less irritable and defeated. And sometimes I just need to be the parent that puts myself to bed. Step 5, take stock of your toolkit. The next few seconds or minute will sound like a mantra, which I like rereading or repeating. And it goes like this. I have solved problems in the past and will have the tools to face problems in the future. Interestingly, tools I may not even imagine now I can acquire, or may not even know they exist. There are people who love me, and I love them back. I have a sense of humor. I have a life ahead, a life that can bring me tons of moments of joy, just as I've had moments of joy before. No matter how small they have been, they will surely come round again. And I have done inner work and therefore have the ability to stand up on my feet over and over. Step 6, do not solve compulsively. This one was a bit counterintuitive to me, but I understood it was something important that I needed to acknowledge. If I start catastrophizing because of an actual problem I have, I may feel the urge to take the first immediate step available to solve it. Maybe this is not the case for everyone, because I know some people actually suffer from the opposite, that it takes a long time for them to actually implement any changes. But not to me. It kind of happens to me the other way around. For example, if I got fired today, what's within my immediate reach is to upload my resume on a platform or work on my professional social media. That sounds wise and determined. But instead, interestingly, at some point, I realized that because I was taking that action as a response to the overwhelm and rumination and catastrophic thinking, I started to associate taking action with anxiety. So it became harder and harder to take action because I would always be dysregulated and with my heart racing. And I actually would be pushing myself to find a solution as if I alone was responsible for and in control of the situation, which isn't always the case. And what's even deeper is that what usually fueled that immediate response was the belief that I was incapable of dealing with unpleasant emotions and that I just wanted a solution to the problem to feel better. Of course, there are a few cases for which the solution is immediate, but I would still double down with compulsion and avoidance in those cases. Now instead, I make sure I'm emotionally grounded first, before taking any action. Then I set a date or a specific time slot in my calendar, some other day, to actually work on the problem. That's a way to let myself know I already have a plan and can calm down more easily. So today might not be the best day to solve the problem, and that way I pressure myself less. Also, over the days, I try to remember that the fact that the problem is not solved quickly doesn't mean I should do more now. I may not actually be able to do more now, but instead wait to see how the future unfolds. And even if I can do more, it may not be wise emotionally to do so. I have an extra note. We all probably have a playlist for studying, driving, partying. I don't know if you have a special playlist to regain hope. If not, consider curating one and have it ready. That's something I do. And apart from my music playlist, I also keep a YouTube playlist with videos that I've watched before and have helped me get out of a state of despair. That's an idea I can recommend too, especially because we tend to forget ideas. Even great ideas, it's amazing, but even those great ideas that became turning points in our ways of thinking, when time comes to put them into practice, we may not actually put them into practice, Don't trust your forgetful mind, particularly during a hard time. In the end, the future will have an impact on my life, but at least I know, with more sensible certainty now, that I'm taking reasonable action, that I'll be equipped to deal with it as it comes, that I won't let the ship sink, and that in the meantime, I can enjoy the breeze on deck. I hope this video helps you, or at least gives you some ideas how to cope with moments of despair. Personally, those moments have become less intense since I devised this process, and I hope you can find your own way too in time.